Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. It's going to be a small group, but hopefully a super exciting and full of substantive discussions. So, yeah, we really encourage you to jump in and ask questions. Let us know, and then, let's try to make this almost an informal conversation on an issue that matters to all of us. So, good morning and welcome to the Nordic Pavilion. I'm Silvia Mantilla. I'm the Global Policy Manager at the World Federation for Animals, which is a coalition of over 80 organizations from around the world. And I'm going to be moderating this really exciting conversation today. There's one message that keeps surfacing across COPs and is increasingly loud, and is that we cannot meet the goals of the Paris Agreement if we treat food systems transformation and ecosystem protection and restoration and climate change as separate issues. They're deeply connected, and the choices that we make in fields, in markets, and on our plates have climate impacts that span continents. And Andreas is going to tell us a little bit about that. When measures to transform food systems from production to consumption are paired with policies that restore ecosystems and reduce pressures on land and sea, they unlock multiple benefits, not only lowering emissions, but also improving water quality, healthier soils, more resilient livelihoods, and just overall better outcomes for nature and people. Yet they are rarely treated as a single system in national climate plans. And Seb is also going to talk to us a little bit about that. Today's discussion is going to bring all these pieces together. We're going to begin on the production side of things in Denmark, which offers a very clear example of the challenge that we have ahead. Andreas Hjornholm, Chief of Public Affairs from Animal Protection Denmark, will take us there, looking at how concentrated livestock systems can create measure pressures on ecosystems and how climate policy can shape and sometimes complicate those dynamics. Anna Salminen, Chief Specialist at the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry of Finland and negotiator for the Sharm el-Sheikh joint work on agriculture here at the UNFCCC, will be bringing us hope to the conversation by sharing with us solutions on the consumption side, such as dietary shifts and food waste measures. And finally, we'll look at how these issues appear or fail to appear in the Nationally Determined Contributions, NDCs, with the help of Sebastian Osborn, Global Policy Manager at Mercy for Animals. Together, we really hope that these perspectives illustrate not only what's possible, but what's needed. Integrated food systems action that protects ecosystems, addresses consumption patterns, and supports just and resilient climate transitions. Each of you will have around 7 minutes, but we'll keep it conversational, and I might jump in with questions to prompt some conversation before inviting you all as well to come in with your own comments, suggestions, and questions. And with that, let's get started. Andreas, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much, Silvia. I'm Andreas. I'm from the Animal Protection Denmark. And I wanted to just tell you a little bit about my country, what's going on there. As you might or might not know, Denmark is measured per capita is the most dense country in terms of livestock. So if you take pigs, for example, we have 1 person per 5 pigs. If you take pigs, poultry, and cattle as well, we have more than 220 million of those every year. So being a small but densely populated a country by farm animals, that puts a lot of pressure on the outside environment, obviously. So while we have very little nature in Denmark. We have experts are saying 1.5% of our area in total is what you could consider quality nature. On the other side, we have a lot of agriculture. 60% of the Danish area is fields, and this has a lot of negative effects for climate, for the water environment. Internal waters are basically more or less dead in Denmark. These are of rivers and lakes and oceans are completely dead by nitrogen. Um, Also intense fisheries, but that's sort of another story. Um, Climate, I mean, agriculture in Denmark accounts for more or less 30% of the climate impact that we have as a country. And that is not counting the impact that we put on other places like the Amazon when we need more feed. So lots of issues to deal with. I think how does Denmark go about handling these issues? What we did was there was a what we call a green tripartite agreement, which is almost like a Danish version of what they call a mutarao here in Brazil. They put the farmers together with the nature conservancy organizations, labor organizations, businesses. Is there any sound? I'm not sure. Can you hear me? Well, I'll take it. It's a little spotty. I don't know if this helps anything. So there was this big mutarao in Denmark where the parties sort of agreed on what should be the goals. Where do we want to go with agriculture in Denmark? And basically what it does is it takes land out of production to solve the nitrogen crisis. So they want to take the land that is just up besides the water and take that out of production so as to not put nitrogen in the water. They also, and this is I think quite a historic shift, they agreed to put a climate tax on agriculture, which I believe is the first of its kind in the world. You can correct me if I'm wrong. It's quite small, this tax, and there's a lot of ways that you as a farmer can get around it, but nevertheless, I think this definitely needs to be commended, that the farmers in Denmark and nature conservancy people and the government are coming together to say we want to do this. Yeah, lots in this agreement still needs to be negotiated politically for it to work properly. We haven't seen the results yet. But so far, so good. I would say we're at least we're doing something, right? Yeah. So, I mean, am I as an animal welfare NGO? Am I just really happy about this? No, of course not. It's also my job to push the Danish government, and I think the problem with how this has been structured is that it identifies a number of problems that it wants to solve. We have the dead waters because of nitrogen. We have climate change because of methane, and so on. And it tries to solve these issues individually instead of looking at what's really at core of the problem, what is really the root cause, which is the mere number of animals that we have in farms in Denmark. So instead of saying, let's reduce the number of animals in farms, which would solve all these crises by itself. Basically, it takes another way into the problem, and that I think is gonna create problems. We're seeing it already. When you take land out of production, basically they want to take a lot of land out of production. This land has formerly been used to produce feed for the animals. That can no longer be the case. So we still have the same amount of animals. What do? We need to import more feed from abroad. I'm looking right behind you, the audience. There's a big map here. You can see the Amazon right here. So I was there a few days ago actually to see what's going on there to produce corn and feed, or corn and soy feed. Basically what they did out, just like if you take a bus 20 hours east, you get to a little place called Santarém, which is a little town where one of the big agri businesses in the world, Cargill, they built their own port, and from that port there's a road constructed that goes 1,000 kilometers just straight down the Amazon, and along the road there's fields. So the forests are being removed, planted with soy and corn instead. So, and I think what the Danish tripartite agreement, our mutarao in Denmark, fails to sort of address is that the fact when you take land out of production in Denmark, you're just going to push the problem elsewhere. So less area for producing feed in Denmark is going to create a pressure elsewhere, like in the Amazon. When you add a carbon tax on animals, it's going to incentivize the farmer to turn up intensification of the production. He wants to push more out of that animal for less input. That's how it works. So I'm slightly skeptical, as you might hear. I still think the government and the parties in the agreement needs to be commended for their efforts and for their willingness to at least talk about these issues. Yeah. So I think is that something like that? I don't know. You stop me, Silvia. You stop me. I can keep going.
I have a question, and then maybe I can bring you in. What are the like in this case scenario? Because there must be something that countries like Denmark can do to avoid, reducing this, without simply shifting these problems abroad. What are those kind of realistic steps that Denmark can take to avoid this?
Yes, I think that's right. I mean, as I said, I wish that we would have a conversation. We could have a conversation about the number of animals in agriculture today. How can you create policy around that? It has to do, in my head, it has to do with changing the way agriculture is subsidized, changing the incentives to the farmer. I would like to see much more. How do you say? Much more organic farming. Basically, I would like to see the European Union change the way the payment systems are set up so as to award farmers who produce more plant-based food for people, not feed for animals. And I would also like to see governments try to push that agenda. Like, it has to do with what we're eating, so maybe we should try to have a conversation about how much meat is really necessary, how much dairy is really necessary for us to lead a healthy life that is also sort of in balance with what the planet can handle.
Thanks, Andreas. I mean, I think this is kind of the perfect segue to bringing Anna. I know you wanted to ask a question. Do you want to come in briefly? Sorry.
All right. How did Denmark get the farmers to agree to a climate tax on agriculture?
Thanks. Did you hear?
I heard, yes. Thank you so much for the question. I think that's a really good point. I cannot take the entire credit for that, but it has to do with some of my colleagues in the NGO world, obviously. I mean, we as NGOs and as civil society, we need to keep talking about what the world needs, what our environment needs, what the climate needs, what the planet needs. And we have quite successfully shown, what happens when you keep industrializing your farms, what happens to the water environment, what happens to climate, what happens to biodiversity in our country. I mean, honestly, I can't speak for the farmers, obviously, but my guess would be that they sort of saw that the public pressure and the public support for doing something about this is so high that it's better for them to go into the room and try to sort of say, we can do this, we cannot do that. So try to negotiate a little bit, I think. But without public support, this could not have happened.
Thanks, Anna. Yes, please tell us a little bit.
Yes, can you hear me? Yes. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. It's lovely to be here, and I love discussing these topics. I'm mostly working on land use sector nowadays, so meaning that dealing with the issues how we use our lands, looking at the climate measures from that perspective, but also what you address, how it's actually so much about how we use our lands for what purposes, and if we make something differently here, does it influence something happening outside? I'm quite happy about these European level legislation proposals, keeping the hope that they are not, that they still would be happening. Also, trying to limit the possibilities of products come into the markets which have been causing, for example, deforestation. So, and that has been, I think, the biggest problem, like the surprise for the European member states has been that it actually, we also influencing our ways of doing, our own ways, because you cannot set the limits to other countries without having those same limits to your countries. So that has been leading to difficult discussions also internally. But I was supposed to be bringing hope in this discussion. Yeah, and well, I was happy to see that there is Denmark on the floor today, because Denmark is currently giving hope to many countries. For some reasons, you addressed really well the limits of this kind of approach you have, but I would still like to address that a really important issue is that you have been able to agree on a target, where to go, and you have been even able to agree on certain measures to what to take, which is can be seen as a miracle. Also, it cannot be easy, but what I was told, I discussed last year in Baku with the Farmers Union from Denmark, invited to this discussion by Finnish Farmers Union. So I think they are following it closely and also seeing that the world is changing and we need to act. So yes, so I was thinking that the way of cooperating is something we can all learn about it. But going to the subject, I was asked to address a bit maybe why it's important to look at the consumption and not only production. I think Silvia, you said it already before how like if we are here to reduce the emissions of agriculture, forestry and land use, we cannot do that without only looking at the production. So large part of the whole emissions come from the whole value chain. Can be also emissions from energy sector, how we are able to transport, how we are able to store and also develop this production and products of these ingredients we produce. But so that's one issue, and the consumption plays a big role, as you well said, that without for example in Finland, if we discuss only that we should be reducing the production, but the people are still eating as much meat as they do, it's not going to change on the global level anything. It might even lead to more severe problems in the places where you have even stronger biodiversity loss, or like in Amazonas, or so that means that we have to act also on this consumption side, and we do. The Nordic countries, I think how I see it being like preparing policies at the ministry, it's mostly sometimes depending on how what kind of government we currently have, might be pushing more or less to that direction, but that's not an excuse not to work keep on working to the more sustainable world. So that means that it's good to have this kind of EU level legislation, binding targets to all of us. So it's a limited amount of decisions we can take actually on national level. That's the one thing. On national level, the other issue is that it's good that we rely on science in many procedures we have. So for example, the nutrition recommendations, the Nordic ones, they are the first ones now for the first time addressing also the climate targets and not only the health targets, but also very well informing us about that they actually go well hand in hand. So there are many reasons for us to change our diets, and what I feel is important that we don't need to change our identities. If we do this kind of changes, we might have different reasons of doing it, different motivations, but the most important issue is that the development would be the right direction, and how this all ends up to our plates, for example in Finland, is that we rely on these recommendations in our public food services, school meals, and that's the way how actually my children at school, they can choose on daily basis if they eat food also containing some animal proteins, meat, or if they eat vegetarian, and that doesn't need to be addressed that now you're actually eating a pea soup which is vegetarian, because well, it used to be on our plates all of these decades anyway, so they don't need to change anything. But because always if something gets political, that brings more tensions to the discussions, and yeah, it's not always helpful. Sometimes it is helpful, as in Denmark also now it has been, but sometimes it's not helpful. And the food waste, I'm at the school now, so that means also that the as we all know, or might even know, that the food waste is a key, also a key issue that's maybe not so politically difficult issue. I think all of us agree on that. It's too much of using 1/3 of our land for production, which is never actually going to feed anyone. So that's how much is actually going to be lost and wasted through the whole value chain. And in Finland, so in many countries it might be different where it happens. The food loss and waste in Finland, it happens mostly in consumption at homes. So that means that we have to be informing and following, measuring and developing the systems how to communicate on practical level on these school restaurants and working places that please consider how much you eat. And I think I was almost taking my dried fruits today, which I actually took with me from Finland. I've been offering them to my colleagues, and they have this tag like -30% because it's expired. But of course, nothing happens to those fruits in 1 week. But that's the way how I mostly, if I go too late to the evenings to buy some food, I always tag like, okay, that's at its limits. I can do some good work, so it can be easily doing. And the last point I want to mention is that it's not only about governments acting, it's about the whole, also companies acting, food stores acting, so that's their way to, they are also committed to their roadmaps and their targets and try to also save energy and save money, so that's also a big financial issue, this lost amount of food. So and that means in Finland you have lots of these voluntary-based commitments they actually do. So the issue is to base on the science and keep tracking how you are doing, and then continue and develop the measures. Thanks.
Thank you, Anna. That was super helpful. I'm curious also, as a UNFCCC negotiator, if there are any reflections you could share with us in terms of the opportunities to elevate consumption side measures in this climate space?
Yes, I think the key word how we have started to introduce these ideas is food systems. And I was just counting, it's always useful sometimes to count the words in your decisions to remind the colleagues of that we actually have it in already. So I think it was mentioned 6 times in our current decision we are here to implement. So that wasn't always the case. So it has been also due to this good pressure of the observer side of of all of you, and also scientists, and bringing this knowledge to us and pushing us to introduce these wordings, but also us engaging with the colleagues. What do we actually mean with this? Is it harmful or not for you? And of course it brings us to these difficult issues of how you manage land if you use it for soy production to feed the animals and all of it. So it's not always easy, but it's there already. And then we try to address this healthy and sustainable diets. And okay, so now looking at the agriculture negotiations, which we finalized last week here, about to continue discussing in Bonn next time. But now we still have the moment to try to push some wordings on food systems agriculture in this Mantilla decision, maybe also under just transition work program, maybe also in mitigation work program. So there are different spaces, and that's my task with my group now on behalf of the EU, also support the colleagues to see how we could have more advanced wordings on this. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and thank you for all the work on in here and at home. We appreciate it. Okay, so to look at how all these issues show up in national climate plans, Sebastian, I'm turning to you now. The food systems NDC scorecard, which fortunately we can't show you on the screen, but we do have some flyers, so you can grab some on your way. Was launched earlier this year in June 2025. My God, I'm losing track of time. Was launched this year in June, and it's a super useful tool to see how countries are integrating food systems in their climate strategies, in their NDCs. And I know that earlier at this COP, you launched an assessment, the findings of an assessment on a few countries. So, yeah, keen to hear about the tool and about the findings. Take it all.
Thanks so much, and it's such a privilege speaking after colleagues from Denmark and Finland, EU, who have been such leaders in this space. I'll start by discussing the purpose of the Food Systems NDC scorecard, and then go on to what we learned in our first set of assessments. So, particularly over the past decade, we've seen widespread scientific, followed by political recognition that policy action to support sustainable food systems is critical to achieving climate mitigation and adaptation as well. And NDCs, as they're in use globally and intended to maximize ambition, have emerged as a uniquely important instrument for transformative policies of the sort that we need in our food system. In NDCs before this current round, we've seen some positive action. That said, there have also been major gaps between these and what needs to happen, including for food systems. So, for example, NDCs have typically focused on the... Thank you. So, for example, NDCs have typically focused on the food production stage while leaving out some or all of the later stages of the food system. Processing, distribution, food loss and waste, consumption. And this misses opportunities for action and also jeopardizes coherence and policy. There have also been gaps in addressing some of the most critical issues, which of course vary by country. Gaps in considering how climate action on food can create synergies with other important goals such as nutrition and livelihoods. Gaps in avoiding policies that could have negative side effects. And gaps in equitably supporting food systems transformation through, for example, finance provision by developed countries, gaps in furthering equity and inclusiveness. So we've had these as well in an inclusive development process. In this context, the scorecard seeks to understand where NDCs are performing well along key dimensions, comprehensiveness across stages of the food system, addressing priority issues, promoting synergies and avoiding maladaptation, and in furthering equity and inclusiveness, and where there are opportunities for improvement. As a multi-stakeholder collaboration between Mercy for Animals, Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, EAT, Center for Biological Diversity, and the Global Law Alliance, and supported by Stockholm Environment Institute, we developed an assessment methodology which we launched this past June. Subsequently, the Scorecard project conducted assessments for 8 NDCs, unfortunately not yet the EU, but hopefully soon, and the reports for these are available on our website. So there are a few main purposes to this initiative. First, the assessments can highlight good examples that other countries can draw from. Second, they can identify gaps to address either in future NDCs or in domestic implementation processes. Third, they can allow us to see common themes across assessments, providing a sense of where support or political signaling could make a difference. And finally, we hope that the methodology, which is publicly available, can be a useful tool for countries in the process of developing their NDC. So the assessment process was in-depth, and it involved for each NDC consultations with country experts. And although we haven't assessed every NDC yet, I think there are a number of takeaways. So foremost, I'm very happy to highlight that we're seeing some great examples of NDCs demonstrating that food and climate policy progress is possible. In our first set of assessments, we scored 2 NDCs as being very strong. That's our top tier of rating in integrating food systems into climate action. And these were Switzerland and Somalia. And to be clear, these NDCs were very different from each other, just as they should be, since the countries are also very different from each other. But for each, we saw concrete and appropriate action being taken at various stages of the food system to address issues critical for those countries. And we also saw that the policies were based on an inclusive process and included good consideration of broader issues of equity. So we hope our analysis of these, as well as other NDCs, might provide inspiration to other countries as well. Second, we've seen cases where countries might have good policies, but unfortunately these policies have not been included in their NDC. And this is a missed opportunity for transparency, for providing a pathway to international support, and for aligning food systems policies with a whole of government approach. In a lot of cases, the policies that were missing included commitments taken at the international level, such as the COP28 Declaration on Food and Agriculture, which I think demonstrates the importance of ensuring that ambitious action and initiatives at this COP or further ones are fully embedded into domestic policy. Third, we continue to see major gaps in coverage across the food system. In particular, a number of NDCs that we assessed did not contain policies on key areas, including consumption, either for health or sustainability, or for reducing food loss and waste. However, we hope this information can clarify a pathway for domestic action in these areas and for coverage in future NDCs. So, in summary, we have some really good momentum towards integrating food systems in climate action, but a long way to go. And further multilateral signals could be very important in accelerating this integration, which we really need urgently. So I'm hopeful that this COP may be able to support this through the decisions coming this week, and I'm grateful for all the work being done towards this.
Thank you. I call it Seb, but I guess for a panel that's inappropriate. So thank you, Sebastian.
Seb's fine.
From the score perspective and following the assessment, what is the single most underused opportunity countries could include in their next NDCs, updates, climate plans?
Thanks, and great question. I think if it's okay, I'll maybe highlight 2 of them, because I think so. One is the consumer stages. So that's improving diets. So that can be for nutrition, sustainability, both, as well as addressing waste. And we're seeing countries sometimes take action in those areas, but the action isn't as complete as it could be. So, for example, we'll see a food waste. We'll see an NDC with food waste action that's entirely focused on on composting, for example, where there are other things that are really important, like food waste avoidance with expiration dates or redirection of food waste, that make a big difference too. And similarly with diets, we're seeing some countries address this stage, but they could be a country with a very resource-intensive consumption pattern, and they're addressing it only from a nutrition perspective, when they should also be addressing it from a sustainability perspective, since there are such important synergies towards those. The other area I'd highlight is in connecting the international side to the domestic side. And I mentioned a bit on that before with the need to be discussing actions taken, like commitments in the various action agendas within the NDC. And the NDC can provide a perfect platform for making sure that those don't get lost at the COP that they happen. But additionally, for NDCs, particularly many for developing countries, having clear ideas of in the NDC of the type of international support needed if elements are conditional, for example, is something that could really help follow through as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think we have some time for a question. Perfect. Yeah, 1, 2. We have 10 minutes, 5 minutes? 5 minutes, okay.
So I've been hearing concerns about potential for countries to greenwash by using like food and land use things as substitutes for fossil fuel phase out rather than in addition to them. Are you like seeing any of that or concerned with it, or is that not a problem?
Okay. Yes, I just wanted to quickly ask about the possibility to have a tax on the consumption side on climate-intensive products such as meat, dairy. I see, as you mentioned, there's a lack of measures on the NDCs, and I also don't really know of any country which has really looked at it and introduced some tax. I mean, like, I'm from Germany, we have tax on tobacco, we have tax on alcohol, all these things which are harmful to the health of the humans and the society as a whole, which cause lots of costs to the health system. And yet when we look at the food, why don't we have a higher tax on beef, on milk and other animal-based proteins? And I think this is really something very, very underrepresented in the NDCs, and I think also on the individual country level as far as I know. But I'm just wondering, as you have worked in Denmark and Finland on these measures, what your thought is about this?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so I can just kick off. Yeah, thank you for questions. I reply first to the last one. So I was just familiarizing myself with the Nordic nutrition recommendations, or actually the Finnish ones, because they have to be implemented in this cultural context of our countries. So we might eat different fishes than the Swedes do, and so forth. So we have differences also. They address quite openly why they recommend us to eat remarkably less meat than we used to have in previous recommendations for this scientific base of what meat can cause, and they at the same time address also this environmental reasonings based on the science. So that's at least, of course, I have seen, I think in Sweden I have seen much more developed communication material towards to the consumers. are not that good in that than our colleague, like neighboring countries. But yeah, that's one I would mention. So you can find that, but you might need to look for it. And this one is in Finnish, but yeah. And the other question was that land use. I don't know if it's been like my point of view is that when I was preparing this energy and climate strategy of Finland, where we are looking at all of the sectors together. So that's where you actually see that this green transition, meaning investments in renewable energy, that also is then causing maybe loggings in our forests, and also you might have like, if I understood correctly, so there are always like two sides in this, and then you have to look at the whole picture. Is it still better to have solar panels on our fields, or maybe could be with legislation guide that energy investments to already open places, which yeah, so there might be like we should be looking at the whole picture when we guide this kind of transformation in the society.
Just to your question, I think this is what makes food policy so interesting, right? Because it has to do with what we eat. It has to do. It's something quite intimate to us. We put it inside our bodies. We put it inside the bodies of our kids, and it's really cultural, right? So this is something. It has to do with a lot of. There's a lot of identity as to what we eat. And I think I'm actually quite hopeful in that sense, because at least what we're seeing right now in my country, and I think in the Nordic countries, is that, probably in Germany as well, is that there's a lot of conflict around what we eat. So it's become it's almost become like a political, social identifier. Do you eat meat or do you not eat meat? How much meat do you eat? Is it good? Is it bad? These questions. And if I'm just trying to remember back 20, 25 years ago, there was the exact same debate, only about smoking. So right now, in my country at least, it's really socially unacceptable to be smoking around others. So my hope is that we are going down that same path, because I think the debate that we're having right now, or the situation that we're having right now, around animal protein, it looks very similar to the one we had about smoking 20 years ago.
Okay.
Thank.
No, please.
It's an interesting question about tension between the two. I don't think in terms of displaying ambition, I've at least seen cases of countries doing that, where they're saying, you know, we're going to do a great food on NDC on food, so we're not doing things on fossil fuels. I don't think that would be an effective strategy at kind of displaying at covering up poor climate action on the whole. And I think that if you do want to kind of present a misleading NDC, there are probably I won't give ideas, but I think there are probably much more effective ways to do it. What we I think in reality, the action on food systems is really important for fossil fuel action, since so much of the fossil fuels are used in the food system. It's about 15% at least of fossil fuels, and it's one of the things that we assess in our assessments for most countries, is whether they're including fossil fuel policies in their NDC as well, because those impact how things are done in the food system, and we don't want the food system to be a contributor to continued fossil fuel dependency. Where I think we maybe have a little bit more risk is in AFOLU policies generally, rather than on the food system specifically. So if we're seeing, for example, biofuels, large-scale biofuel production being used as a component of a transition, that's the type of thing that can, yes, it could reduce fossil fuel use, but it's also creating a lot of other very serious issues as well. So that's yeah. So I think that's kind of more of the area in which we do look out in our scorecard for attention on those.
Thank you, Anna, Andreas, Sebastian. Thank you to the Nordic Pavilion for hosting this conversation, and thank you for the thoughtful questions and comments. And we do invite you to stay after if you want to connect briefly, and otherwise, yeah, grab a flyer on the NDC scorecard on your way out. And I think maybe to leave us off for the rest of the day and moving forward, I think there are a couple of points that are clear. Food system transformation is climate policy, and demand-side measures are a major untapped opportunity that we can tap on. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of the COP. Bye.
Thank you, Silvia.